Okay, welcome to this fifth day. Yeah, it's amazing how time flies by so quickly. It's the fifth day. uh, so we will use the first few minutes in meditation. Please find yourself in a comfortable position with backs upright in positions that is convenient to you to sit in meditation. We will begin by taking 3 rounds of deep, deliberate breathing, and that we'll do in sync together, during which time we will breathe in through the nostrils and out through the mouth, and that we try to do with attention anchored to that as well. So we breathe in, try to breathe in fully, and then maybe if needed, pause a bit, and then release it all out again. And that's how we will do it for 3 rounds together. And during that time, try to anchor the mind to it, so that we gather our mind to the present moment here and now, so that we could set the tone for the mind to be good receptacle for the hearing, sharing, reflections to take place in the utmost way it could. So once again, find ourselves in a comfortable position, backs upright. Maybe take stock of your situation here right now, the condition right here and now, with your body in the position it is, the sensations of touch, be that under the feet, on the seat, hands in the gestures they are. Try to have a general sense of the sensations of touch of the body and feel a sense of grounded. If need be, adjust a little bit so that you could come back to a posture of ease, comfort, convenience. Now let's begin with the in-breath. Now slowly with the in-breath, try to bring the breathing slowly but gradually into its natural rhythm, adjusting it to settle into a natural flow, while you let the breathing just happen on its own without trying to impose any deliberate force, strength, length into it. Let it be how it requires to be. Let us not expend any exertion, any efforts in controlling, in regulating the breath. Let it be however it requires to be, even if it means irregular breathing in between, even including taking deep breath. Let it be however it requires to be. All we do is try to stay connected with it. Connected with it by sensing it, by being aware of it. If need be, taking resort to feeling the sensations associated with it. So stay aware of the breathing, be that in breath, out breath, including the pauses in between. Just be totally, completely attuned to this natural rhythm of breathing, feeling the sensations, it may be sensations at the entrance of the nostrils, inside the nostrils, maybe even into the chest, into the abdomen, both when we inhale and exhale. Even be aware of these gaps in between. That way, try to be fully anchored to this natural rhythm of breathing while it is taking place in its own natural way without our attempt in regulating it. But in staying aware of the breathing, try to do so with some intentional effort of staying afresh, attentive, infusing a sense of delight in doing so, being contented in being with the breath, in getting to walk leisurely, comfortably with the breath, getting to walk lightly with the breath, with nothing but the breath to be aware of, without giving in to any temptations of trying to hold on to it, regulate it, interpret it, judge over it. None of that. All we do is stay connected with it. That we try to do with quality, with those three factors in place, combined together. And try to do so one breath at a time, round after round, so long as we can. And when we lose track of the breathing, and then as soon as we figure that out, again remember to be gentle to oneself, gentle with oneself in merely realistically acknowledging what has happened, taking special caution in not slipping into making too much fuss over it, beating oneself up over it. Instead, just merely acknowledge that. Remember to come back to the breathing and start over again. Try to be fully present with the mind, the awareness filled with just that of the breathing taking place in natural rhythm in real time, here and now. Let's take 2 rounds of deep, deliberate breathing here. This time breathing in and out, both through the nostrils. Let's do it together. Coming back once again, settle into a natural rhythm of breathing. Try to give one's best in being with the breath, with those qualities in place, with least giving into the distractions. And see if we could do that one breath at a time, round after round, for a few rounds together. Now slowly let go of the focus on the breathing. Let's see if we could settle into a simple state of awareness, where we open our mind fully, letting any thoughts, ideas, full freedom to exit and enter at their will, while we try to stay neutral to them, maintaining this open spaciousness of the mind without being altered by the thought plays that's happening, while we maintain this open spaciousness with those qualities in place, alertly, attentively, ardently. Any attempts that we notice of ourselves in trying to entertain certain thoughts or resist certain thoughts, once again, just merely acknowledge that to be happening or to have happened, instead of making too much fuss over it. Remember to merely acknowledge that. Come back to maintaining the open spaciousness of the mind while letting full freedom for thoughts, ideas to just be. We maintain this open spaciousness with those qualities in place. Hopefully, with fuels running low for those thoughts, ideas, mental formations, etc., to keep going on with our deliberate attempt at keeping away from entertaining them, chasing after them, resisting them. We find ourselves in a relatively quiet, calm, clear, open mental space, taking advantage of it. That's almost as if dropping down deep into our core being, reach out to our core being, core aspiration in the form of aspiring to be happy, joyful, peaceful, anything that we associate with goodness, that we identify as worthy of pursuit. Connect with that very fundamental aspiration and wonder whether we are always successful in realizing it. And even wonder whether we are even connected with that at times that we really need. For now, wonder why is it that we do not seem to fulfill that aspiration, how fundamental, rightful, justified, reasonable it may be. Why is it that it is not met, fulfilled, despite our attempts being driven by that deep down? What comes in between that messes up the process? Or if there are any, think of how we react to situations, how this relative calmness that we find ourselves in at present could be disturbed at any time, replaced by a strong sense of distress, worry, anxiety, depression, fear, how sometimes they feed each other and snowball to such a proportion that nothing seems to be any worth pursuing, having. Even life itself seems to be not worth living. Think of many people, many beings who come to such desperation and choose that unfortunate step to be the only option out. Is that what our deep-seated aspiration aligns with? If not, how come? Springing from that deep fundamental aspiration, how did we end up there? And likewise end up in so many ways that we ourselves have difficulty wrapping our heads around. Very often, we are fortunate enough to recognize the culprits in between, the culprits that have no other function but to destroy the peace of mind, but to destroy calmness, peacefulness, happiness, joyfulness that we so fundamentally aspire for, and rightly so, reasonably so, justifiably so. Sometimes we are fortunate enough in recognizing those culprits in the form of strong self-obsession, self-centeredness. Yes, deep down, almost underlying just about everything, including this rightful aspiration for happiness. Deep down, we see everything being underlaid by this mistaken perception of things having almost an independent existence of their own, independent identity of their own. Even if that may not be that apparent in being an explicit player in these desperate situations. Nonetheless, we do recognize such culprits as strong, almost feeling justified hatred at that moment, self-righteousness, self-righteous indignation, blaming everything on others, strong attachment, jealousy, greed, covetousness, malice. And the list goes on and on and on. So many of them that we run out of names for them. They virtually are like spectrum, unending spectrum of afflictions of one kind or the two combination in varying degrees. How they all have no other function but to destroy the peace of mind right here and now and lead us, or rather mislead us, to unfitting, untoward actions, be that springing in mental form, conspiring, plotting, calculating, leading to more obvious verbal, physical, unbecoming actions, unbecoming of this smart, intelligent human being that we all claim to be collectively and individually. So, yet how unfitting are the decisions, are the actions, are the whole process in the face of this claim. Sometimes we get so caught up in these with our full cooperation, knowingly, unknowingly, kind of ready to give up our whole control in its hand. To the point of saying we have lost our mind, we have lost ourselves to this gruesome beast of afflictions that we have all along assisted in and stood by, confided in. This is the reality, and all these lead to is sufferings. Even the so-called joys, happiness, high points in between. They are almost nothing but like water bubbles popping up on the surface of water, almost claiming like this is distinct from the water, some kind of an achievement, but built in with the suffering, each one of them to be entailed with. Let's take a moment here in wondering where we got all of this. Did we train in this? Even young children have this. Babies seem to have this. Young children seem to have this. Even before going to school, how come they are masters in this? Where could they have gotten this training? If we were to be able to trace everything of this to this life, could it have happened during pregnancy, during conception, or afterwards? Sometimes we wanted to say that I didn't sign up for this. Where did this anger come from? I didn't learn it, nor did I put any investment in it. But where did this come from? And then if we were to tease out, sort through them, there are so many distinct layers in them, in the form of very strong self-centeredness, self-obsession, disregard of others, partiality, biasness, jealousy, greed, and then deep down, almost invariably present, almost informing just about everything, including our relatively temporary positive thoughts even, with this grasping at an inherent existence, at an objective reality out there, almost capable of setting itself up all by itself. Where could we have gotten this? And along with this, think of the strength, force, and variety, diversity of our latencies, of our proclivities, of our predispositions, predisposed latencies, be they of one kind or the other, how diverse we are in the same family, between siblings, between even so-called identical twins. Where could this have all come from? Top this up with such incidences, so many of them, of people remembering past lives, of being verified of their claims, be that through medical records, or so many of the out-of-body experiences, affirmed even by the reluctant doctors who are helpless, but affirm what had happened in front of them in the operation centers, theaters. So many of the out-of-body experiences, be that someone in the operation theater or someone who have just passed out during having tattoos, having other experiences of falling down, and some out of the blue just pass out and then come back to tell so many stories of what they had gone through, many of which could be verified, but definitely not happening in their body, which didn't show any sign of life, to the point that others around declared them dead, even medically so. Whatever may be the case, these culprits cannot be sustained, cannot be retained, cannot be maintained. Because despite what we so genuinely, rightfully, reasonably aspire for joy, happiness, peace, and deep down we are not even against others having the same thing. But how do we come out so different in our actions when we are confronted with these situations? Just a small thing can just turn us upside down. That's what we have allowed ourselves to be in. And that's what has led us to, with no prospect in sight of any reliable, lasting state of being at peace, in control of ourselves, at peace with ourselves, in a more lasting, genuine, confident way. These surely are not something to let be. And it is not just us who are realizing this at this moment. Many in the past, in the history of humankind, many have wondered about these questions, including that of historical Buddha. See what he had to say. He points to self-grasping, deep-seated self-grasping, and together with it, rubbing shoulder with it, is self-centeredness, which we do not seem to question at all, shy away from raising our finger at them. They feel so secure within us, so securely governing us. And see what do they let loose on us. All of these recognizable culprits in the form of well-pronounced, fully pronounced afflictions like anger, jealousy, grief. They are nothing but sports, constructs, sports of these two main culprits ruling over us. Since we have seen under their rule, there's no prospect of joy and peace. It's time, high time for us to raise our voice against them. Luckily enough, just as Buddha has pointed out, and it has been verified by his disciples like Nagarjuna and Asanga, etc., and have been verified even further through their own practices by masters through the ages. These two so-called main culprits do not have any stable base of their own. We could see through their fake stable base, expose it, and realize how unfounded, ungrounded is their basis, is their claim for what they appear to be, what they present themselves to be. So not only are we compelled to turn our back on them, but there's hope the pursuit can result favorably, provided we press through, press on, persist in our efforts. Let's now make this pledge to our own goodness and through us to the goodness of others that we so dearly care about, that we will not lose time in building, maintaining, strengthening this force against these destructive elements that have been so unjustifiably, undeservingly ruling us. Among the measures that we will be taking up will be particularly against the self-centeredness, the spirit of compassion, growing from its very feeble form to eventually into immeasurable compassion to great compassion, to this infinitely blossomed great compassion. Together with that, we are complementing it with this smart, unmistaken, smart wisdom, insight into the reality, true and true, so that the entire base for this upgrasping is exposed, debased, completely thrown away. With these hopeful notes, let's come out of the meditation by opening our eyes and lifting our gaze at our own convenience. Okay, welcome to where we left yesterday. Okay, so we were at verse number 15. And we were in the middle of this discussion about how to logically substantiate the fact that given our present condition of how even some form of adulterated compassion is difficult to be pulled up. Someone that we may have so strong compassion one moment, it takes nothing but a slight opposition, a slight disrespect for our compassion to be completely gone, even if that may be assisted with attachment and whatnot, but that compassion is gone. So given this situation, how do we logically substantiate the fact that compassion can be developed, generated, increased, to the point of not only being purified of any elements of attachment and etc., but at the same time be extended to all sentient beings irrespective, and that too be all comprehensive, exhaustive in covering all kinds of sufferings that others may be already undergoing or may have the potential to undergo. So how do we make the case for that? And particularly if we say that this is not a lifetime's project, it is a project that extends lifetimes, several of them, so many of them, numerous of them. So in that regard, first and foremost was the question of whether there is life after and life before. So yesterday we tried to rally around this point by citing so many of the evidences, right? So many of the evidences that we have hard time explaining otherwise if we do not allow for this thing called mind to have its own continuum preceding our birth, preceding our conception. Although we single out mind, but we are not, although we are singling out mind in this respect, almost to the suggestion that there will be a case of mind with no physical element attached to it. But that's how usually we get an impression of when this question of what mind is in relation to body, etc., is tackled in the lower schools of Buddhist philosophy, almost as a preparation to then build its understanding of mind more comprehensively, more fully as it moves up the ladder. So with that in mind, the highest yoga tantra's position on what mind constitutes of, what does it ultimately boil down to in terms of its entity, should and should be taken into consideration and deserves consideration here. For lack of time for us to go through all of them, so we we uh, we fast forward we fast forward to the ultimate position, and there it says that the subtlest clear light mind is always inseparably accompanied by its corresponding physical, if you will, physical base or physical corollary in the form of the subtlest energy. And this so-called clear light mind, how we arrive to that is not by means of what you call dissecting, or by means of dividing up the temporal continuum of a consciousness into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. That's not how we get to the question of subtle mind. The subtlety has nothing to do with the temporal length of it, but rather in its own nature, by its own nature. So subtlest in that form. And within that we could talk of its temporal parts, etc. But that's another thing. So this most subtlest consciousness, together with its accompanying energy, is considered to be, if you will, the ultimate, the fundamental building block of anything, not just consciousness, together with its corresponding or complementing physicality also. So that's something to be taken into account, kept in mind in what the Buddhists are proposing. And I would very much suspect that even scientifically, when we speak of these gross material things, there could be subtle building blocks, not necessarily partless, just as this so-called clear light mind is also not considered temporarily partless. But nonetheless, there could be something very fundamental that could not theoretically be ever destroyed or taken out of existence. It could change momentarily, but itself cannot go out of existence. I suspect that should be the case. At least we're proposing this in the case of the mind, but that's not exclusive mind, because it is always accompanied by its accompanying corollary of a physicality. And that's the case even in the case of the so-called formless beings also, particularly from the highest Yoga Tantra perspective. So anything to be being has to have fundamentally a mental component, and that mental component is never ever separate from, at the very least, its corresponding complementary physical component. So it is on this basis that so looking at this, it is quite interesting. Just as sometimes we say, oh, scientists fall on the one end of the spectrum in suggesting monism, in being reductionist, but reductionist boiling down to everything material ultimately, and that the Buddhists fall on the other end of the spectrum in that it also stands by monism, except it is everything being reducible to mind. That is not the case. On a gross level, at the sutra philosophical schools level, that is. But those are all considered. Given that there is even a more refined position on the mind in the highest Yoga Tantra, we would consider by Buddhist logic, by Buddhist, what do you call, thread of reasoning, we would consider all of these sutra takes as provisional. And thus, Buddhists will not fall into this other end of the spectrum of being reductionist with everything reducible to almost exclusively mind. None of that is not the case. So this is something very important to keep in mind, considering this beautiful proposal. At the very least, for now, we can take this as a proposal in terms of how things exist. So it is on this basis we say that just as in the case of the physical body, the gross ones kind of disintegrate and disintegrate and what do you call get disassembled and disintegrated and whatnot. But in terms of its very subtlest building block at par with what would be subtlest clear-eyed mind from a Buddhist perspective, there might not be. There should not be, I think. There might not be so-called complete destruction. And here I'm also thinking of how scientists, the physicists, do claim such a status on this quality of charge, I think electrical charge, that is never created anew. Of course, it would have its continuum and not any existing, any given moment kind of itself, exact its copy of it continues, but the continuum never ends, nor is there any beginning to the continuum of it. It's never created, nor it is destroyed. So we claim the same thing on the question of on the question of the subtlest clear-eyed mind, and that all of the grosser consciousnesses, they can, if you will, dissolve, or they can kind of become dysfunctional and dissipate with their corresponding physical basis being becoming dysfunctional or unoperational, and thus giving space, so to say, or opening the way out for the subtler ones to surface and almost like take over or functional with no other alternative, if you will, or no other ways but for it to be operational. Whereas when the grosser ones take over, the subtler ones almost go dormant, do not get activated. So these explanations kind of almost present them like a physical thing, but nonetheless we can extrapolate from that in terms of what could be applicable in things consciousness that we speak of. Now that's one thing. Another thing is, even from a scientific point of view, not every child with all the environment intact from a physical point of view necessarily come out live without having been intervened deliberately or knowingly, even letting the entire process to the natural way, with everything being accountable in terms of what could be present physically, doesn't necessarily result in a live baby. That is by admission of the doctors, physicians themselves. So now, what could be missing? Although such occasions are very rare, and even from a Buddhist perspective, that's understandable. There are so many candidates. There are so many candidates with their application to be born. So there are so many applicants there. So just about most of the positions are filled. But somehow some fall through that crevice and do not at all have the chance to qualify for any position available. That's when where some positions come out vacant. Okay, so that's I think I would not need to go at length because there would be no end to this. And I also forgot to pull out the quote from the scientist who has for long been looking into these entities. There are many of them. There are so many of them looking into. And then yes, the very fact that something could be remembered is something to be paid attention to. Why are they, even a very innocent child, when they remember something, where in the world is this coming from? And then take into account how so many of them are verified, and how the children themselves are so naive and do not necessarily insist on them all the time, nor have they any self-interest in this. And sometimes even at the risk of really what do you call, really frightening their parents, making them worry what might be going through, what might their children might be going through, what could this lead to, freaking them out. Okay, I think I made my case. I think, and I should stop here in terms of how at least Buddhists present their case. So it is definitely not the gross consciousness that are said to continue the way we understand. No, they subside in the sense of kind of almost go out of existence, giving way to subtler and subtler. And the subtlest consciousness, even before that, the three so-called increase, appearance, increase, nangte topsum, in appearance, increase, and near attainment, they are too subtle for our too subtle for our usual understanding of consciousness. And then the subtle consciousness is even further subtle than that. And even by Buddhist admission in the scriptures also, by the time we hit this almost the point of clinical death, at the fourth point of dissolution, where the body would have stopped breathing, the air element having dissolved, with breathing already stopped. Although we sometimes say the inner breath is still there, whatnot, but the outer breathing that we know of as breathing has already stopped. With that, all of these physical signs or physical signatures, if you will, of life, such as brain activity, breathing, heartbeat, all of them would have already stopped. So at that time, even the Buddhist scriptures claim the body to be the way we usually understand to be when it comes to the well-known consciousness. No sign of them, yet the subtlest ones still abide, and they could they could be sustained in the process, and also go through those stages as accompanied by their corresponding inner appearances, inner signs. All of these so-called 8 processes of death have their, although we call them processes of death, they are rather dying processes, right? Dying processes until the very last one, when the subtlest clear light mind is all there is, together with its accompanying energy, to be active, or to be active. Although that active is not something that we usually not at the level of our understanding of usual acquaintance. So except for that very eighth stage, all the previous ones are rather processes of dying, leading to the death. But still, we would not have been dead. Dead will be when even that leaves the body. So all of these processes, all of these 8 processes have their corresponding inner signs in the form of appearances to the consciousness, to the corresponding level of consciousness, be that subtle or gross. But the first 4 processes, which still involve physical body, have their corresponding physical signs as well. For those by the side of the dying person to observe and kind of verify, as well as for the dying person to kind of sense that's what may be happening on the physical level. And usually these so-called 8 processes, together with their signs and appearance and whatnot, are said to happen exactly only in the case of those who would have died a natural death. Here, natural death defined by a death that is not happening in the wake of long protracted protracted illness, nor after having the physical body having become so decimated for whatever reason, except for the physical change or weakness, whatnot, that happens with natural death. Only in such cases, all the 8, and yes, in the case of sudden death, that is that the process are not supposed to be happening exactly as prescribed in the scriptures. It could be, what do you call that? It could be truncated. Yeah, it could be truncated or messed up, whatnot, but not happen in the same way. And also in the case of very protracted disease, protracted illness, right? Someone who has remained bedridden for so long, at the end of which someone dies, then such a person may not have that same processes in the same order as prescribed. But so those are all kind of to be collectively considered in terms of how the process of death is to be looked at. And as I mentioned earlier in our meditation also, there's so much to look into our own mind and say, where in the world did I get this? Of course, we have not signed up, but we have not signed up for so many things, right? If we were to just think that this is just the first and only life, then there are so many things that we have not signed up for, but we are really reeling under them, and then that is having so much of an effect of our life. And that doesn't seem to be justified, fair. and even if that were to happen, why not that happens equitably? Why is it that and then how come some even don't get to live more than a day or two? What's the whole point in coming out? Yeah, so these cannot be put under rug. These questions should be kept alive and tackled while one can, so that by the time we say, okay, now bye-bye, we would have all of this figured out to the extent we can and have some confidence in what we could expect, rather than be totally unprepared and then say, where in the world am I heading? How am I supposed to fare, right? What could be done? What could happen? But what could be done? How? All this needs to be taken care of, because it involves one's own interest, one's own prospect, one's own experiences. I usually make joke by saying we pay so much attention to insurance We should have an insurance for this. Just as we found ourselves totally, what do you call, totally taken back in this life. Like as, as soon as we are aware of our being here in the world, it's already quite a while. So much have already been shaped up. And that's going to bear in what lies ahead, or at least what it will take for us to really kind of make a difference or make change, whatnot. And that could be the same thing if we continue thereafter, so that we do not get taken by surprise, and even be able to come with bodhicitta, some insight into emptiness and whatnot, so that the slightest condition can kind of land us right there, almost at 30, 40 years of education, right there at the slightest meeting of the condition. How wonderful that would be. And then that would brighten the prospect of even developing further. That's how we have to prepare for. We have to prepare for, inch by inch. That's how Buddha did. And in the case of the Buddha, he really underwent so much of hardship in figuring out what does it take, so many missteps here and there, and then what do you call, stepped back and then moved again, and so many of the missteps he did that he had to kind of undergo hardships and whatnot. And then when everything was figured out, he laid out a very smooth, least invasive, assuring roadmap for us, and how this is making big difference. It's like prior scientists going before us, doing all the donkey work in figuring out things in all those unfavorable situations, whatnot, and then getting the finding right, so that now all we have to do is, maybe if we want, we can verify it for a while within a short period, so conveniently, and then move from there and then make the breakthrough. So we have the chance of, what do you call that, standing on the shoulder of Buddha. Not with disrespect. So yeah, so these things are not to be just shunned away, and don't feel that when I'm sharing this, I am telling you a cock and bull story. Don't think that. I know you didn't see it coming. Yeah, but I have come prepared with that. Yeah, so don't just so easily brush it away. Really. And then, as I said, and as I implicated, I mean, you must all know, I may be just repeating just for the sake that I will feel comfortable in feeling that, oh yes, I have said this. In that unless we have some other paradigm to replace it with its components, everything complete components in place, capable of accounting for a whole system, whatnot. Unless this is the case, if you buy into the working of karma with this individual beings being the master of their own fate, master of their own destiny, master of their own prospect going ahead, then one has to really think through this seriously. just the very question that we find ourselves in this life itself should be an indication that it is possible that we could repeat this. If so, could there be a chance by which we could make a difference? Because everything depends on causes and conditions, and particularly things that affect ourselves in terms of our experience or whatnot, that seem to be, from our own observation, very clearly, to a great extent, a contribution of ourselves in how we play it out, in how we conduct ourselves. Even take the case of pandemic, which is affecting everyone, but in terms of how it affects, which is affecting everyone in a general sense, but how it affects individual is very different. It's not clear cut. It's not one universal way that we could all presumably say that this is what is happening. No, it could be affecting so many different ways. And that's totally due to how individuals are approaching it, looking at it, and embracing it. I think I have stressed it enough. And then, as I was saying, once we uphold this, then so many of the so-called mysteries can fall in place. We can connect the dots here and there and begin to make a complete sense of how things might be. And then, if need be, we could check into the scriptures and say what the scriptures say, and then kind of see if one could kind of put things together for one's own understanding, for one's own confidence. And then, as I said, with this, the playing ground becomes much wider. Now you have so much more space to run to. You don't have to just keep circling. You can now run one direction and then for a while and then another direction. Oh, you have so much space to really feel free and run and whatnot. So you can really expand on the strength of connection, indebtedness, kindness, connectivity, all the give and take, all of those. Okay, I think so let's assume the question about life after and life before is tackled. Okay, let's assume that. Now the other question is, now given that, how come something like compassion can be really developed to the point of really pushing one to those actions, to eventually kind of pushing one through to this culmination into full awakening? How could it be the driving force? How could it gain that strength of being the driver behind so much of a wonderful, amazing response or amazing action, reaction? To a certain extent, we can all allow, from our own experience, as soon as we give rise to compassion and whatnot, how we feel right then and there. It's like compassion, right? You generate compassion, you feel the compassion. Others don't feel the compassion unless you express them. But you feel it right then and there. We say giving care to someone, but one has already given care to oneself. And others may or may not get it. It will depend on how you decide going ahead. But you're already giving care to yourself. These are amazing, amazing qualities that we should be very, very grateful to have the capacity to generate, to bring our wonderful, smart brain to kind of join us in this mission of building this wonderful heart within us that can affect the brain itself favorably in really becoming more smart, in coming up with so much smarter ideas, creative ideas, more resourceful ways of thinking things through. So how could this happen? Now, this depends on yet another aspect of what we call clear light. Earlier, we were speaking of clear light, the subtlest clear light mind, the clear light of mind in the form of this, in the form of, on the ground of subtlety, subtlety, both in subtlety in the sense of how dependent it is on a gross body. The less dependent it is, the lesser it is dependent on a grosser body for it to exist, for it to function or whatnot. That is considered grosser, subtler and subtler and subtler. So in that respect, we could lend to something called the clear light mind of the subtlest kind. Now here, irrespective of any level of grossness on this account, all the consciousnesses, particularly the mental consciousnesses, let's for now stick with the mental consciousnesses, although the sense consciousnesses are also not exception to this rule, but it will be easier to handle this on the mental consciousness. So on this second account of clear light mind, it is not just exclusive to the so-called subtlest clear light mind that we have to wait for it to be naturally manifest till our stage of death, or on other occasions while we are alive, but occasions then where the subtlest one is, it just approximates of them, it may become manifest, but that's usually when we are ourselves not in our senses, and that's not being able to employ them on the path or ever kind of arrest them and utilize them. So this other aspect, this other notion of clear light of mind, is something that all consciousnesses share. That too, all the times while they are active. Although when they go dormant, even that aspect of clear light mind could become called to have become dormant. But when they are activated, there's no other way but for this clear light aspect of every consciousness to be active as well, because that's what it takes for any consciousness to be active, for this clear light aspect of it to be active. And this clear light active is nothing but I will use the term fundamental, but fundamental not in the sense of having to wait until all the grosser ones have subsided, but fundamental in the sense that oh yeah, today I have this thing, oh yeah, I have this ball here, crystal ball. Oh, you can see this, right? Yeah. So clear light mind in the sense of this crystal ball being not soiled, not defiled, no defilement having gone into its fabric. If I leave it for some time, some days in the dust, whatnot, it will gather dust, and its luminosity or its glow will be not visible, and it will almost seem like it has become soiled to its very core, though it has not. One can just wipe away the dust, and its clarity can be revealed, and it has not lost in the meantime at all. It just got covered. We all know that. We use this other metaphor of sky and against the clouds, whatnot. No matter how overcast it may be, the sky is never corrupted. That notion, the very basic nature of sky is never corrupted. It can still be revealed in its pristine, uncorrupted, unclouded form at any given time. Although from far it would look like it is covered or compromised. So clear light in that sense, it's mere, sometimes we call this mere awareness and knowing nature. Sometimes we say clarity and luminous, or we call them by so many different terms. almost to the point of thinking like, oh, it might be a light. It is not a light. It is not a physical thing. We are using this with this connotation, this concept of undiluted, clear, luminous connotation to strike, to convey this uncompromised, unadulterated nature of it, no matter how 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 strong, thick, built, entrenched a defilement such as anger, jealousy, greed, maybe how clouded we may feel mentally, but still within that very cloudiness, the cloudiness itself is built on, itself carries that revealable purity, and that is usually called the conventional clear light mind. Although the previous one is also conventional, but not as ordinarily conventional as this one, because this clear light nature of the consciousness is present all throughout our what is the expression, yeah, all through our conditions. So saying that the defilements are adventitious, they have not made inroad into the fabric of the consciousness. They are only superficially there, or adventitiously there. I'm tempted to call it temporarily there, but for fear that it might convey wrong impression. It's not temporary. It can stay forever, like it has done for so long, until we make a move to remove it. So not temporary in that sense, but nonetheless revealable, feelable, right? If we make effort. So nothing is guaranteed in terms of our prospect of becoming full awakened. It's all contingent on if we make effort. And then in the case of in the case of enlightenment, if we persist in our in our effort, persist. This persistence is worth pushing for, because this is going to lead to a light at the end of the tunnel. All of our other efforts that we have been making under the dictates of the afflictions, under the dictates of the self-grasping attitude, of the self-obsession, those are all worthless efforts that are not going to ever pay back. No light of tunnel can be ever expected to see through that pursuit, no matter how much we toil, work. And that is, from a spiritual point of view, that is not even tsundu. Tsundu is joyous effort, although I always claim even that is falling short of capturing tsundu. One could joyously make effort in negativity, and that doesn't count for tsundu. So many people take joy in negativity and put all effort, investment, whatnot. That is not tsundu. Nonetheless, joyous effort. Yeah, we take joy in negativities. That's the reason why Buddha started out with saying, recognize the true suffering, not just anything by way of suffering. Recognize the true suffering. So goes the same with recognize the true joy, not just anything that goes by joy that you want to under your own dictates. So none of those efforts, no matter how invested, pursued, protected it may be, doesn't count for Tundu. Tundu is efforts in positivity. Any effort that we make deliberately towards, no matter how slight, how people, but nonetheless a positive transformation, positive change. Shantideva was very clear in defining Tunri. And in Lamrim Shamo, Tsongkhapa very clearly says, what is meditation for? Meditation is familiarization, but familiarization on what? Familiarization on positive mental states. So many of the things that we do in the name of meditation, just for the sake of feeling good in a very, very neutral mental state with no other purpose for that, but itself, I don't think that will count for meditation. We can do so with the mental aim for then pursuing next for a positive thing and positive growth, whatnot. Then, by way of motivation, even at present, neutral effort of calming, stilling could be counted as meditation, but not otherwise. If just the feeling good at the moment is the end by itself, with no effort in transforming the mind in the sense of mitigating its stores of negativities, its stores of kleshas, dissonant mental states, be that of cognitive nature or emotional nature. If anything we do in the name of meditation is neither aimed at that with clear perspective, nor kind of geared towards that or succeeding in doing that at whatever level, whatnot, then I think it's very difficult to say it's meditation. It can be a numbing exercise. Numbing exercise, if not so numbing, could be stilling exercise, quieting exercise, calming exercise, which sometimes we can get that from many physical exercises, yoga, etc. Just where we put our attention on one thing, it's but natural for the mind to feel rested, and where generally it will induce the feeling. Okay, so much of it. I'm digressing. I'm going. Yeah, partly because it's close to our break here. And now coming back, then I'll continue from this other aspect of making case for the possibility of developing training to the point of generating this wonderful, almost unimaginable at our level attitude of great compassion, given its dynamics, its extent, and its reach and influence in the mental world. So the main objection from the opponents in terms of the possibility of a fully awakened being in the form of Buddha was that there are no causes leading to it, and that even if there were to be causes, there would be no way by which you could logically prove that. So the whole second chapter of Pramana Vartika is divided up into these two parts. One establishing the causes leading to an authentic, full-knowing, fully compassionate Buddha. And then the second half is, and of course, through that, it is also proving how causally you can lead to such a state. And then the second half was kind of reversing that order into in logically establishing, kind of through logical regression, I think, or if you may, through logical regression, you could lead to how such a state of being could be traced to the ordinary world of ourselves, and stemming from there, causes could be causes could be cultivated, obtained, by which that could eventually lead to such a state of being. And here, reliability, as I said earlier, has to do with is reliability, fully reliable and fully reliable and worthy of fully confiding in, when it comes to showing us the path out of our suffering to relative states of freedom, progressively to that of complete uprootment of the causes of the sufferings, to eventually even overcoming or eliminating the subtle traces, subtle latencies, subtle instincts of them, so that not the slightest tinge of any of the obscurations remain anymore on the mental state, and the mental state is completely, fully revealed. Its full potential is reached. When we say full potential is reached, then there is nothing, no part of it ever remaining to be manifest, or not ever remaining to be revealed. There's no seed there that has not blossomed, and that all pertaining to the positivity, because when it is but natural that when you increase the positivity, negativities have no choice but to be decreased. So when the positive qualities are brought to such a state of full awakening, then it means no room whatsoever is left for any negativity to ever pop up its head. It's just physical law, right? Physical law of the physical law. The more you increase the heat, the cold will go down, right? And likewise is the case with positive qualities. So one lesson for us to remember here is, the more compassionate we become, and that too, hopefully, compassion that extends to everyone, the more compassionate we become to everyone, the less chance, more weakened our tendency of losing temper, the more weakened our chances of nerve wreck. So now the second part here. So right now we are just working on the first reason of many, and that is great compassion. And there we have to struggle with first, how is it possible for something to be trained over lives when there is no many lives? So that was proven on the basis of mind, on the basis of the element of mind, and that too resorting to the final position of the highest yoga tantra. Of course, all the lower tenets are pointing to such a thing, but they do not themselves have the complete wherewithal to prove it. It's almost like they just borrow the statement, but do not have the wherewithal to kind of actually explain it. They have to wait for the highest yoga tantra to come to their escort. And this is very true with so many of the positions of the lower tenets. Either they would come up with their incomplete position, or completely concocted position, completely, yeah, completely concocted position, which has no bearing in reality whatsoever, but come up with something by which they could hold the fort for a while. Or else they could be pointing to the right thing, but really not knowing what actually that entails. And they have to wait for the higher yoga, higher schools to kind of come to their rescue. This is quite interesting, coming as they are from one person, one being, Buddha. This makes perfect sense of how it is laid out, how there is the prospect of digging deeper and deeper and deeper and exploring more and more and more. Okay, so that's it. The second leg of proving, making the case for such a great compassion trained over lifetimes is that even if one allows that there is many lifetimes and that one could pursue, that the person continues and thus something retained in their mind, right, can be passed on or can be carried on, and that can be affected and kind of then affected in the next life, and thus kind of brought about a change on it. But they say it could go only so far, but not to the point of becoming infinitely developed. Infinitely in the sense of where you don't see any limit to it. Right? It has blossomed fully, leaves no room for setting any bar for that, any limit for that. Not that Buddhas differ in their power of compassion, in how much their compassion have fully blossomed. They are equally fully blossomed, and there's no such thing as one is little more than the other one. No, but nonetheless, they have all increased, have all developed. We call that, just for the sake of calling, we call that infinitely, because there's no finite limit that one can point to. So this was the contention here. They're saying, oh no, this is not possible. It should have some limit. It should stop somewhere. Just as in the physical world, things stop somewhere. And in the scripture, in this particular context, we could come up with so many examples where there is a limit, where we hit a limit. But in the scripture, in this particular section, as you already know, the two examples are one of water boiling, and the other of someone training in jumping high jump. It's quite amazing to see at Olympics, right? They just barely break their own record or previous record or fall short of it. But how we could very easily see, oh, there is a limit beyond that they can go. Quite easy to see, no matter how much they may try. And then that's what they are doing at the peak of their body, peak of their life, and it will only go down. I still wonder how would a frog fare. If we calculate all the proportions, right? The frog will be far beyond world record. Poor frog loses on this chance of gaining world gold medal.
Geshe, in California, they have frog jumping contests.
Really? Wow! How do they make them know that there's a competition? Yeah, there may be. I mean, they have so much things like so many competitions that they make animals do. I don't know how in the world they come to know that's their day. So the point here is saying there has got to be some limit in how much you can train. Because look around us, everything has a limit. Take the case of someone jumping, right? No matter how much, how much, how much they, how much help they take in jumping start. By the way, I looked up the word jumping start. That doesn't quite fit with what I have in my mind. Jumping start it says that already jumping, already running before the start line. So someone is moving in the direction of the start line. What we meant by nichong that I was looking for in the English term is taking 2-3 steps back in preparation and then going, not right away coming to the start line. And very interestingly, such words are used in the concentration practice of the dhyanas. I may share, when I was studying the part in Prasna Paramita, in the perfection of wisdom, and one full session, say of 3-4 months, we study on samsuk, samden sungme, stabilization, right? Form stabilization and absorption. I recall very clearly having a sense of concentration, competition, concentration. What do you call? Kind of an Olympic. But and then I came across this word called nichong, which is similar to jumping start. I said, oh, this is actually pointing to such a what do you call, competition. Almost got a sense of people from everywhere coming and showing their mettle of how much of a concentration practice they could develop. Anyway, so it's saying that it requires, every time it moves, it requires, say for jumping, it requires taking resort to jumping start, running start, and at no point they can say, now I don't need to do a running start, I can just jump where I am. They cannot do that. And there too, they see the limit in how much they can jump, right? And then it goes down. They will hit a peak, and then that's it. They hit the ceiling, and that's it. Not beyond that. They cannot break the ceiling. And then likewise with the water. You say, I want to boil the water and make it even hotter and hottest, and eventually the water would have no choice but to give up, saying, no, I give up, I dry up, I myself go out of existence. Otherwise, these guys are making me, giving me a hard time, boiling again and again and again. So it itself dries up. The whole base of the water to be boiled, it itself gives up. So these are indications of limit in how much you do. It's not that you can keep the water and then push through its temperature far beyond indefinitely. Eventually, the water itself dries up, or the person kind of hits the limit. Likewise, they say could be the same with compassion. You would have to hit some limit, and beyond that, you cannot progress anymore. Or else, they may be suggesting that eventually, if you push so hard, the consciousness might itself snap. It might itself break, and the person have no consciousness at all. So in this respect, the Buddhist take is that no, this is the case with the physical things, but not applicable here in the case of the mind. Mind has this something called the conventional basic clear light nature. Not only that the defilements do not enter them, the consciousness never ever lose that quality of purity, uncorrupted purity and the knowing nature. In no given situation can it ever lose it. Even when we have anger, whatnot, right? It's almost like this same ball. Now it's placed on a blue base, something, everything, wherever you look is blue, blue, blue. You can't get rid of it. You can't get the clarity of it, right? Off of it, except blue, blue, blue. It almost seems like the blue has kind of seeped through it, but that's not the case. You just lift it and then you will reveal its purity. Likewise, is the same case with even anger, jealousy, greed, and whatnot. They are all in the form of mental substance, mental entity, and thus all invariably have this clear light, conventionally clear light, uncorrupted, basic mental nature. That is the reason sometimes in the scriptures we speak of, and that's particularly the case in tantric texts where you have wisdoms at the other end of the spectrum in the form of fully awakened wisdom, which are connected with anger, jealousy, greed, I think arrogance, etc., of the 5 afflictions at the other end of the spectrum. And it's the same substance, except it has now gone transformation. I would rather use the term transmutation. Yeah, transformation and transmutation, in that the substance remains the same, the form gets changed. So all throughout the clear light nature, in the sense of mere knowing and mere uncorrupted awareness nature, is never compromised. It stays put. The outer structure of the defilement gets affected through antidotes, and then that in turn is replaced by positive qualities. Now you may wonder, oh, even the positive qualities that replace it also remains temporary, right? Because it would also have not entered into the nature of the mind. The mind still would be basically pure, luminous, aware, knowing nature. But in the case of these qualities, positive qualities that you build, unlike the basis for anger, unlike basis for the defilement formations, these have valid grounds, valid standing. They are supported by valid cognition. It's like you tell the truth, and it has its own natural force of staying put, staying the ground. Not in the case of however big and bought in sold lies. They always have this shaky ground. So the truths, the facts, have a natural force in them, that of a support of a valid cognition that goes well with the clear light base, and doesn't succumb to the same force. Of course, it has to be developed, eventually developed to the point of no return by force of habituation and whatnot. But nonetheless, all along, it would have this uncommon, unusual, unique, valid base. So